Bible worm, reading the Bible with Bible worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas.
And I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week, we're reading Peter's denial of Jesus as told in John 18:12-27. In what may be one of the most challenging discussions we've ever had, we discuss the moral injury that accrues, for Peter and for ourselves, when we encounter the gap between who we thought we were and who we turn out to be in life's most challenging moments. We think about the incremental decisions that lead Peter to denying both Jesus and his own true self, the well-meaning denials that seem to start out innocently enough, but build until Peter has rejected Jesus altogether. We notice that when the rooster crows in John's version of this story, Peter doesn't even notice. So little has he even realized what he has done. When the rooster crows for us, we wonder, what will we notice? Thanks for joining us. Hey, Amy, it's Bible Worm time.
Hey, Bobby, it sure is.
I just saw you only not hours ago, but it was hours ago. It was like
you could count the hours.
36 hours, 48 almost.
Yeah.
We were together in Wewoka, Oklahoma. I just like to say Wewoka. I think that's a cool name. Leading a group from the Pastoral Leadership Revitalization Program.
It's always so fun to be with those groups. It really is such a pleasure to just drop into that world and spend some time in text and figure out how to do worship together in a way that feels worshipful for both of us, at least sometimes. That was our last,
doing worship together has been sort of surprisingly good, interesting. It's not immediately obvious how that would work, but
would work. No, exactly. Yeah, but it's been great. I hope every time we do it, I'm like, is that the last time we'll ever get to do something like that?
Well, I don't know. It was the last time that's on our current schedule. And so hopefully someone will invite us to come do something else cool one of these days, and we'll do it. Otherwise, we might just see two-dimensional Amy.
Otherwise, Zoom it is.
Yeah, all right. Well, Amy, today we are moving on to John chapter 18. It is interesting in the John Gospel of the Narrative Lectionary because we're moving today to the night of Jesus's arrest and trial, and we've still got a little bit of a ways to go before Easter. So we really linger in this year of the Narrative Lectionary in this last kind of 24 hours of Jesus's life and then into Easter. Are there things we've missed out from the middle of chapter 13 until the middle of chapter 18? Today we're in 18:12-27. Are there things that, as you were looking through there, that either caught your attention or that we need to know in order to get us ready to read today?
Yeah, I thought I was just going to skim through it to kind of see if there are any plot points that people needed to know. And so I will give you a plot point sort of at the end of this, but I will just encourage folks, if they have not really spent time with these chapters, they're so rich. There's so much in here. And one question that comes up that for me feels really relevant to our reading today is in chapter 14, it brings up this idea of the spirit of truth that should be among you and sort of the importance of that element. And, as we'll see today in the story of Peter's denial of Jesus, that question is front and center. I don't know if that's the kind of truth they're talking about exactly, but it felt really resonant to me. In terms of plot, what I think we need to know is that they have been in this dinner together. The last time we read together, Jesus was washing the disciples' feet. They have this whole evening of learning with Jesus. And then they go out, and across the way, Judas has brought this group of soldiers. It sounds like a very dramatic, kind of scary scene. The soldiers are out there with lanterns and torches and weapons.
Yes.
And Jesus just goes up to them and says, "Who are you looking for?" And they tell him, and he says, "That's me. I am he."
Yeah.
And is really sort of persistent in like, if that's who you're looking for, it's me. So you can calm down with the rest of your display here and just take me. And they do. There's this famous scene where Peter responds to this threat against Jesus by drawing his sword and cutting off the ear of a slave of one of the high priests. And Jesus says, "No, that's not how we're going to do this."
Right.
Like, put your sword away. This has to play out. And don't defend me in the way that seems, I don't know if I want to say seems natural to you, but like that was his first impulse, was I'm going to meet might with might.
Right.
And Jesus says, don't.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in this? Like, it's such a big intermediate piece that we've sort of missed, but not a lot of plot.
That section of the book is often called the farewell discourse. It's just conversation that Jesus is having. I say conversation, but it's mostly teaching from the foot washing in chapter 13 to the end of chapter 17. As you're saying, it's really, profound and beautiful part of the Gospel of John, and well worth a read, but it's sort of theological discourse and not really moving the plot forward. Mm-hmm. The one thing that from there, to me, that first of all, I just really love it. And then second of all, I think it plays in a little bit to our reading today, is in 13:34, Jesus gives an instruction that he calls a new commandment. Mm-hmm. And the new commandment is that you love one another just as I have loved you. You should also love one another, which I really love as a framework. It's a little different than the golden rule, which in my tradition is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. This is love one another as Jesus has loved you. So that's a high bar. It's not self-referential, right? Yeah. There's a reference outside of oneself that I think is really important. Then Jesus starts to talk about where he is going. You can't come. And Peter says, "Why can't I follow you? I'll lay down my life for you." And Jesus says, "Will you lay down your life for me?" And then says, "Before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times. And so this is a backdrop that Jesus' life is in danger in our text that we are reading. And Peter, as we'll see, he's there. Is he willing to lay down his life? And then we'll get the crowing of the rooster in this text today. All right, Amy. Well, our text for today is 18:12-27. By the way, I don't know if this matters that much, but in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, these events take place following the Passover dinner. So the supper that they have together is the Passover meal. And so this is the night of Passover itself. In the Gospel of John, everything takes place one day earlier on the religious holy day calendar. So the last meal begins the day of preparation. And all of these events take place as we're on the day of preparation for Passover. And then Passover begins actually when Jesus is put in the tomb. I don't know how much that informs anything, but it is an interesting difference among the Gospels.
Yeah, I'd have to spin that out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Me too. So I'm picking up in 18:12, just after Jesus has told Peter to put his sword away. And I'm reading in the Common English Bible. "Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the guards from the Jewish leaders took Jesus into custody. They bound him and led him first to Annas. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it was better for one person to die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Because this other disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. However, Peter stood outside near the gate." Okay, Amy, so this story begins with an arrest that you were kind of narrating to us earlier. It's always been a little strange to me that Jesus is arrested in a garden in the middle of the night. It's just because it's kind of hidden away and like out of sight of the people. I'm just curious if that strikes you in any kind of way.
I had not really thought about that before. I mean, I guess the way it was playing out in my mind was that Judas had told the officers that Jesus, that was a place where they go.
Yeah.
So they were sort of waiting for him.
Yeah.
But the way that you phrased the question was making me think, you know, you've spoken not just in this gospel, but whenever we're talking about the story of the gospel, that this is a really politically heated situation, and we're coming into a time of year that people are thinking about political liberation and feeling a deep sense of religiosity. Like things could be stirred up. And so maybe doing it at night and doing it off the beaten track is a way to try to do it on the down low.
I think that seems right to me. I think maybe that's resonating with me in a different way this year. And I think maybe it's because of some of the arrests that we've been seeing on the news or in our communities that are being kind of like, they are kind of stirring up the population. And one way of kind of working around that is to do it in secret in the middle of the night, these kind of like abductions and private moments. And so I think you're right that that's why it is being done this way, is if they do it publicly, it's going to cause an uproar. And so they find a follower of Jesus, that is Judas, who is willing to tell them where he's going to be in his private moments. Mm-hmm. And that's how they take him into custody. When you read this, and it says that they arrest him and take him to Annas, you kind of think that Annas is going to be somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you do.
And he is, but the way the text have it, he's the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest.
Yeah.
Now, it turns out, if you kind of do your research on high priests in this period, that Annas actually had been the high priest earlier, and he had either been sort of removed from his office, I guess, by somebody, and Caiaphas, we find out here, is his son-in-law. And so we've got the former high priest who is the father-in-law of the current high priest, and that's the guy they take Jesus to. It just surprises me that that's how this is going to go.
It's very strange, and I think it's especially strange because Caiaphas already said a couple of chapters earlier, like it seems that he is on board with this. Like I could have seen it as like a potential workaround if they are not sure how the high priest is going to respond to this idea. But back in chapter 11, Caiaphas said that if it's the whole people's well-being at stake and taking this one person off the table could remedy that, then we should do it. So I don't know. I have no theory about why they're going to Annas.
Yeah. There's two things that occur to me, but I don't know which one is more reasonable or whether either one of them makes any sense. One is, that while Caiaphas is the official high priest, Annas, having been the former high priest, is still the respected authority, or he has claims somehow.
You all have your clergy emeritus.
Yeah. He's still exercising authority through his son-in-law, even though technically his son-in-law Caiaphas is the high priest. That Annas is the one who's kind of working behind the scenes and making all those decisions, and Caiaphas is kind of a puppet's the word that's occurring to me as I gesture sort of like a puppet. And the other thing that I have wondered about is whether the fact that this is the day of preparation of Passover makes it somehow problematic for Jesus to go see Caiaphas in this context. Maybe Caiaphas has some kind of important duties. One of the things we do notice in John is that Jesus never goes before the Sanhedrin and never has a trial before the Jewish leaders. And some people have interpreted that as they can't have that gathering because how close they are to the holy day.
Yeah.
Does any of that resonate with you in any kind of way?
I mean, that It's also funny to think about because this is not like the way that Passover is described in the Torah in Exodus, because there was no temple at that time. And it's certainly not the way Passover is done now. But if I'm trying to think of where things would have been around this time period in the Second Temple period, yeah, it really was. This was the pilgrimage to the temple, and the high priest is the officiant at the temple. And so it entirely makes sense that Caiaphas would be otherwise obligated, and maybe also that the Sanhedrin, the sort of court, couldn't be pulled together during that time.
One other way of sort of thinking about this is a lot of this sort of takes place extrajudiciously. There is a system by which these things generally were supposed to work.
Yeah.
Which is what is more reflected in Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And this seems to be kind of happening in a roundabout kind of way with people who aren't officially in power, but seem to exercise some actual power.
Yeah. I think the other piece of it that feels interesting to me is how power is being exercised with such urgency. Like they're about to come into not that long of a time, like a week, where they're going to have to focus on other things, but they feel such urgency to do this before that.
Yeah.
That it pushes them outside the official channels.
They do seem to be trying to get this all done very quickly.
Yeah.
And we're going to see in a couple of weeks that they're rushing to get Jesus off the cross, about half a day from now before the Passover begins and all of that sort of thing. Now, we had a little bit ago Simon Peter saying, "Jesus, I will follow you." And Jesus saying, "Can you really follow me?" And so in verse 15, we get Peter starting out following Jesus. So we get Simon Peter and another disciple following along behind Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But when they get to the courtyard, Jesus seems to be taken on into wherever Annas is. But there is a barrier in which only people known to the high priest seem to be able to get in. And so Peter gets stuck there, and the other disciple goes on in. And so I guess I have two sorts of questions or thoughts. One is just about the fact that Peter gets stuck there and can't follow Jesus at least for a moment.
Yeah.
Did you read that as sort of like, is it just practical, or is it symbolic of something, or how do you read Peter's stuckness?
Well, this is maybe just sort of like a point of minutia, but a question. Who does the high priest, who would the high priest think the other disciple was that he would say, "Okay, I know you, so you can come with Jesus"? Like, does he think he's not a disciple of Jesus? Or does he think he is a disciple, but not a dangerous disciple? I guess I don't understand why they would let in one of Jesus's followers because they knew him.
Yeah, that's my other question. So that's a good, that same idea sort of bugged me, that I had framed it a little bit differently. Like the way that I framed it was, who on earth that is a follower of Jesus has access to the high priest?
Right.
And so it's the same question, just from the other end. Like your question is a little bit, why does the high priest let a disciple in? And my question is how is there a disciple who knows the high priest? But it's the same kind of issue.
We're trying to picture how this sort of social network worked and functioned, that you would have someone who sort of has some kind of in with the high priest and also has thrown in his lot with Jesus. And at that moment, those two identities together allow him to go through where Peter can't.
That is really interesting to think about, because, so first of all, I tend to think of the religious authorities, the establishment religion, and like the Jesus movement as being separate and never the two shall meet. And here, like, it's just clearly that's not the case. And so I wonder who the disciple is. We never find out.
That's right.
And so there's like a really important person in Jesus's, like if you know the high priest, like you're kind of somebody, but we don't know that about them. It's just kind of a strange detail.
Yeah.
And then if the high priest does know that he's a follower of Jesus, and he vouches for Peter to get him in, then what sense does it make for Peter later on to deny that he was a follower of Jesus? So it seems like it must be the case that the high priest doesn't know that the disciple is a disciple.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So he's like slipping in with whatever crowd of people wearing his identity as a friendly acquaintance to the high priest.
Yes.
When in fact, he is also wearing his identity as disciple of Jesus, but other people don't know that.
But other people don't know it. And maybe I'm not clear whether known to the high priest means like they went to high school together.
Yeah, right.
Like they're like old friends. Or whether it means like the high priest recognizes him in a crowd. But I think you're right that in some way the other disciple who is known to the high priest is holding their discipleship identity. I think they have to be holding it back a little bit.
Yeah. You originally asked sort of just how it, felt sort of reading that Peter was kind of stuck outside the gate.
Yeah.
And it made me think of the sheepfold.
Yes.
Where people, there's someone manning the gate that recognizes Jesus and will let Jesus in and out. And here it's like sort of, maybe it's a silly comparison and it's just like, yeah, Amy, that's what a door does. But that's what it made me think of.
No, I think that's a really keen observation because we spent a long time on that text in chapter 10 about the gate and who it lets in and who it doesn't and who is the gate. And so to use all that language over again and and expect us to not make those connections seems like your brain has to make those connections.
Yeah.
And so then to think about like, what is it communicating? Is it the gates of the halls of power? And so Peter's not recognized in the halls of power? Or is this supposed to be like the sheepfold? Also, the word for courtyard that's used here is the same word that's used for sheepfold in chapter 10.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you've got a gate leading to a fold or to a courtyard. But it's not Jesus's courtyard.
Right.
So I don't know how to quite sort all of that out, but somehow this gate is letting the one disciple in but preventing Peter from getting in. I also when we have this conversation about Peter being a follower of Jesus and saying, yes, I can follow you. And then the first thing that happens is he gets stopped at the gate and he actually can't follow. Yeah. Seems to me like it is somehow symbolic of the difficulty Peter is going to have.
Yeah, I love that, Bobby, because in this instance, he can't follow and it's not his fault he can't follow. Like he was serious when he said he was going to follow and he tried and someone else closed the gate.
Yes.
And so then that makes me want to hold the question of sort of like, hold the question of accountability and what are the other forces at play in any given situation that enable us to do or not do what we said we were going to.
Hi, my name is John Weicker, and I am the Associate Pastor for Youth and Their Families at First Presbyterian Church of Durham, North Carolina. I am a Bible Worm supporter at the Bible Worm supporter level, $48 per year. And I do that not because we're on the narrative lectionary or even because I preach that often, although when I do preach and the texts line up, I certainly use the podcast. I actually use Bible Worm as my own personal devotion for the week. I'm someone who misses the deep theology and close reading of texts that I got to do a lot of in seminary. And in Bobby and Amy's work, I found that again. And so I listen on Monday mornings on my way over to church and then Monday afternoons on the way back as a way to prepare for the week, to do ministry, and to love Jesus and serve. I hope you'll join me in becoming a Bible Worm supporter too. And now back to this week's episode.
So I stopped kind of in the middle of verse 16, and so I'm going to pick up there.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other disciple, the one known to the high priest, came out and spoke to the woman stationed at the gate, and she brought Peter in. The servant woman stationed at the gate asked Peter, "Aren't you one of this man's disciples?" "I'm not," he replied. The servants and the guards had made a fire because it was cold. They were standing around it, warming themselves. Peter joined them there, standing by the fire and warming himself. So this reminds me of sort of like an exclusive club where the bouncer knows somebody who the bouncer lets in, and then the person who gets in is like, hey, that's my buddy out there. And so is invited in.
Yeah, that's right.
So this question that she asks him in verse 17, my understanding of the Greek, and I'm following Gail O'Day here, is that the way the Greek is phrased expects a negative response. So it's like, you're not one of this man's disciples, are you? Or something like that. So I don't think it's the case, if you follow O'Day's reading anyway, that the woman has recognized him, but that she's asking the question by way of just being careful about who she's letting in or something
right.
like
It is
that.
her job to, it's so fun. Yeah, it's her job to make sure maybe that disciples don't get in. And she's asking it in such a leading way that it's almost like a very sort of like check the box kind of security.
Right.
Like, you must now affirm that you are not one of the, And he does. He checks the box.
The way that she asked the question is about his discipleship. I mean, I don't know how to distinguish exactly between denying Jesus and denying your own discipleship. But what the question she asks is, you're not his follower, are you? To which Peter says, no, I am not his follower. It's not exactly saying anything about Jesus as Messiah or not Messiah, Son of God or not Son of God, but he's denied that he follows Jesus.
Yeah, he's denied his relationship to Jesus, which actually, the way you ask that raises another interesting question to me. Like, what does it mean to deny Jesus? How do you deny? I actually have not thought so much about what exactly that means. Maybe because I have this scene in my head, so I picture that to deny a person means to deny a connection to the person. But certainly it doesn't have to be that.
I don't know why that struck me differently here, because I think it actually is more or less what happens in the other Gospels, that what they're denying is the following of Jesus. Maybe it's because of that passage that we read last time with the washing of the feet and like the deepness of the connection, and like Jesus loved them until the end, and all of those things. And so to deny the relationship just feels really harsh here.
Yeah, really harsh, and like really harsh in just a human way, not even in like a theological complexities, kind of way. Like, it feels cruel.
So Peter, who has just said, I will follow you to the death, is now saying, I don't know
Never
met that guy. Peter is standing next to a fire with all the servants and guards, who I think are the people who just arrested Jesus. And so he went in the garden from, I'm with Jesus and I'm going to attack you because I'm trying to defend Jesus, to now associating with them. I'm just trying to get into Peter's head. Like, is it just because he's cold?
Yeah.
Or what's happening there, do you think?
I mean, here we go with Amy trying to empathize with the wrong people. But I guess I wonder in this scene, what are the options available to Peter at this moment? Like, if he had said, when she asked him, if he had said, I am a disciple of Jesus, what would have happened? Then he just wouldn't have been allowed in? Like, is he maybe thinking practically the best way I can be of help to Jesus, thinking again that his responsibility is to try to care for Jesus's body in some way, is to get inside that gate and to build some kind of rapport with these soldiers. And I don't know what else he would have done at this time. Like, could he have gone in to be with Jesus? I don't know. You could also read it totally as like sort of like selfishness, like he's cold. And this is comfortable, and we are creatures, and he wants to stand by the fire, and this is terrifying. And now he feels like he's in hiding because he said, I'm not a disciple, but obviously he is a disciple, and he's surrounded by people who probably mean him harm. And like maybe he's just gone into his own self-protective mode. But like strategically if he were thinking strategically, I don't know what he should have done in this situation.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Amy. You're pushing me to think differently about this text in a really helpful way. I don't read this as Peter has any mind that he can somehow rescue Jesus from the high priest, although maybe he's got that in mind. But maybe that he just wants to be as close as he can get, and maybe he wants to see what's going to happen next. I like that reading. And it helps me because then the I am not isn't such a like strange thing. Like what, there's a way of denying Jesus, which is to say, I'm not a follower of Jesus. There's a way of denying Jesus, which is to say you're not a follower of Jesus for strategic purposes.
Right.
Which can end up with you denying Jesus. But you're not like trying to be a Jesus denier. You're just trying to work the system, and you end up denying Jesus. Right. And that seems a little more kind of close to home for me. Like maybe I could see myself doing that kind of thing.
It was making me think as I was reading it, yes, it's like a way to work the system, trying to follow the rules of the empire.
Yes.
In order to bring about the outcome that you want. That might be counter to the outcome the empire wants, but it's like accepting those rules of engagement and trying to work with them.
Yeah. And having sort of been not identified, but questioned in a way that called out his identity, like now he's trying to blend in in a way. And there's some danger with that blending in, maybe it's fitting too easily into the way of the empire. The fact that these are the people that I think just arrested Jesus, and now Peter's there with them, like he was trying to cut their ears off, and now he's hanging out the fire with them.
Yeah.
But then I was also thinking, as you were talking about sympathizing with the wrong people, that especially the slaves of the guards, they probably don't want to be doing this either.
That's
like
true.
They are kind of trapped in a situation that they don't have any agency. And so I don't know where that goes exactly, but it's not simply that those are the terrible people around the fire, but they are also people that are trapped in the system.
Yes.
That maybe they don't want to be trapped in.
I actually think that's really important. And I don't know, or I don't remember how this plays out in this story as it continues after this week. But I know when I have read the gospel stories before, a lot of what's been most distressing to me is at the end of the day, it almost seems like nobody takes responsibility for it. Like, it's like, like no one wants to actually own anything that's happening. Like it's like, lots of people participating in a system, maybe feeling like they don't have a choice but to participate in the system, maybe feeling like there's some other force pressing them into this, but I don't know. We'll see what happens in John.
We've been talking a lot this last few months about the use of ego eimi, I am, and who says that and when they say it, and famously connecting to the self-revelation of God to Moses at Sinai in Exodus 3, and then Jesus seems to use it that way. Here, Peter says the inverse. So instead of ego eimi, it's uk eimi, I am not. And this is that same issue that we've been talking about. Like, it's just the way that you would say that.
Yeah.
But also when we've been in this world of like affirmations of who Jesus is, and then the question is, are you a follower? And then to say, uk eimi, I am not, just seems like a deep negation of one's true identity, a refusal to reveal oneself at a kind of a fundamental level.
Yeah.
Which cuts a little differently than he's saying what needs to be said to get into the courtyard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading it now as sort of like a fundamental denial of his true commitments.
Mm-hmm. No, I think, and the I am thinking in the divine voice, is such a statement of like presence and here-ness and, like and so then to say I am not, to me really sounds like a absence. Like it's a denial on such a fundamental level. It's really quite sad.
Peter's very cold. It just strikes me. They made a fire because it was cold. They were standing around it warming themselves. Peter was standing there warming himself. Maybe this is just like it was cold, and so they were warming themselves. But the emphasis on that in the narrative, did you do anything with that, like symbolically, or like is it inviting us to anything about cold and warmth and gathering around the fire, or is it just trying to sort of get us in the mindset of what the night felt like?
Well, I hadn't thought about that before, Bobby, but there's a lot you could do with it sort of metaphorically. I mean, I guess the way I had been thinking about it was just the focus on discomfort in our bodies that humans are prone to. And so if you have the opportunity to be more comfortable in your body when you're uncomfortable in your body, it's hard to choose something else. But trying to think about it more as like, what is the source of warmth and light that is going to sustain you? I don't know. Is that sort of what you have in your mind, like that kind of metaphorical reading, or did you have something
I don't know
else?
that I have anything in mind as much as it seems noticeable to me in the text.
Yeah.
And if you are of a mind, as we often are, that details that are drawn out in the text are often serving some sort of purpose, then maybe this is serving some kind of purpose. But I don't know that I have a great answer about it. Maybe the coldness, like it feels vulnerable, or it feels alone, or it feels uncertain. And so you're drawn to a place that feels more comfortable to you. But when you're drawn to the comfort, now you're surrounded with the people that were your enemy just a minute ago.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right. Right. There is still that shared human piece of things that is a common denominator, and sometimes a confusing one.
So we've been sort of outside in the courtyard with Peter. Now we're going to shift inside to where the chief priest is, or Annas is, I suppose. It's interesting that it just calls him the chief priest when we just established that he's actually not.
He's just functioning that way. It's fine.
So I'm picking up in verse 19. Meanwhile, the chief priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered, "I've spoken openly to the world. I've always taught in synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews gather. I've said nothing in private, except for what I was saying for the last 5 chapters during. Why ask me? Ask those who heard what I told them. They know what I said." After Jesus spoke, one of the guards standing there slapped Jesus in the face. "Is that how you would answer the high priest?" he asked. Jesus replied, "If I speak wrongly, testify about what was wrong. But if I speak correctly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Do you have a sense, like the only thing we get is the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. If you were imagining the sort of line of questioning, like what's the high priest, do you think, trying to uncover? Do you have a sense of like what the high priest is after?
That's a great question. I feel like it would be looking for any grounds that they can, I guess looking for any grounds that they can formally sort of accuse him on. But as he responds, like everything has been out in the open and there are witnesses to every, whatever, the healings on Shabbat, that whatever it is that they want to be upset about. So this kind of just feels like intimidation to me. Like, I don't know what other information they would get from him.
I think that's right, Amy. You said something a minute ago that's rattling around in my head about how Caiaphas, the actual high priest, this guy's son-in-law, was one of the ones back in chapter 11 who had heard about the resurrection of Lazarus and was saying, it's better for one man to die for the sake of the people.
Yeah.
And so I can read this as like Annas wasn't there, and so he's trying to verify. Or I can also read it as he wasn't there, and so he is clueless, and says something about the cluelessness of the people who are actually exercising authority.
Yeah, I could see that.
Or just wanting to get Jesus to say something kind of in a courtroom setting-ish.
So like it is like a duplication of efforts, but really because people aren't talking to each other, and because as you said, if we even imagine there was a fair process available, they're not inside of that process. They are doing something
I think that's
else.
right. I think it's either that, got to be that, or they need Jesus to say something within this moment after he's been arrested. They need him to make some sort of a confession or something.
Yeah.
But they don't actually care about that. Like at the end of the day, that doesn't actually end up mattering.
Right. They don't get it. And it's, yeah.
Why do you think Jesus could just tell him what he's been talking about and what he's done, but instead Jesus says, don't ask me, ask the people that I've told. So there are people in the world who know exactly what I've been saying and doing.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Jesus sends the high priest that direction instead of just answering the question?
Yeah, it's so interesting because, well, on the one hand, I think it sort of draws the contrast that you kind of pointed out at the beginning of the reading, that this is happening at night in some like little garden. Like they're intentionally making this arrest happen under the table when Jesus's whole ministry has been out in the world. And so Jesus keeps trying to point them back out in the world and be like, I am not an under the table guy, and you're trying to make this an under the table thing, and I don't want to participate.
I like that a lot. And you could also imagine, the reason that they arrested him in the garden is because they didn't want to stir up the crowd. And so if they start going around to the crowd and saying, what did this guy say and do?
Yeah,
then they're just going to rile it back up. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And so they're just trying to get it taken care of without in a sense, like in an anachronistic sense, like without due process, but without like making it public what's happened. I also wonder, this gospel is big on this issue of, at some point you just have to believe the testimony of someone else.
Yeah.
And Jesus is famously going to say this to Thomas at the end of the gospel: blessed are you who have seen and believe, but more blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. And so this gospel has been emphasizing really since the beginning, since John the Baptist, the importance of testimony, and that at some level you're just going to have to believe someone's testimony. Mm-hmm. And so for Jesus here to say, like, I can't tell you, or I'm not going to tell you, but there are people who could tell you, sort of resonates with that theme a little bit.
It's so interesting, Bobby, because as I was reading this section, like I don't know, this is sort of like self-convicting, but like, I understand why he was slapped. Like that is also like, if your child said that to you, like, why are you asking me what I did? Yeah. You can just go look yourself. Yeah. Go ask my brother. He saw me do it. Yeah. Like he's not playing by the rules.
He's not.
And he knows he's not playing by the rules, I guess. And I don't know. I felt the sort of tension within me of both recognizing the line that he was crossing by speaking this way to the authority figures. Yeah. And also, like, I understand what he is saying. Like, I didn't testify falsely. Yeah. What are you so mad about?
Yeah. Yeah. If my kid that said that to me, they would have gotten my kids get timeouts that are the same age they are, So like my 4-year-old gets a 4-minute timeout. Mm-hmm. So if I had been that guard, Jesus would have gotten a 33-minute timeout. Yeah. Go sit in that corner for 33 minutes and think about what you just said.
Think about Jesus. What you just said. But maybe that is a way of sort of making really clear that like their system relies on Jesus recognizing their authority. Yes. And if he doesn't.
I think that's right, Amy. I think that's a really nice reading. And, when you're in a position where somebody has something over you that you just don't care about. Like they really have nothing
Yeah.
over you, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
so Jesus doesn't care about this thing. I could kill you. Okay. Like, so
That's
he has
true.
no reason
That's
to like
true.
cower before them.
That's
And so their authority that they're used to wielding is no authority,
That's right.
and they don't know what to do with it. It's so interesting to me that it's the guard who slaps. And it's not like Annas is offended, or at least it's not narrated this way, that Annas is offended and slaps Jesus or has the guard slap Jesus. But the guard is like, how dare you speak to my boss that way?
because he's so bought into that
I guess so.
system.
Or sometimes, you know, how people who are caught in hierarchical systems
Yeah.
in the middle, like sometimes feel, I don't know, pressured or invited, or they feel better about themselves. I don't know what the emotional dynamic is if they can kick down at somebody else. So if I can slap you for disrespecting the hierarchy, then that affirms that I am higher in the hierarchy than you.
Yeah.
I'm about to do a Marxian analysis where I'm like, if the guard and Jesus could just unite forces, they could overthrow the hierarchy. It would be so amazing.
Yeah. That can be your apocryphal version of this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the essence of the gospel, what I just said, really.
Yeah.
With, you know, like this sort of egalitarian, non-hierarchical kingdom of heaven is the way to undermine the hierarchies. But we keep slapping each other instead of loving each other. So there's one more section here that picks up in verse 25. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing with the guards, warming himself. They asked, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" Peter denied it, saying, "I'm not." A servant of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said to him, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Peter denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. I mean, it is so interesting to me that Jesus has been inside the high priest's quarters saying to Annas, "If you just ask my followers, they'll tell you." And exactly while that's happening, they're outside asking Peter, and he's denying any knowledge at all. Do you find like that irony? I don't know what the word is.
Yeah.
Ironic? Do you find that irony
Do
ironic?
I find the irony ironic? Yeah. I feel like with every time that Peter says, "I am not," again, I feel like I wish I could know what was going on inside of him,
Yeah.
but I can like feel the moral injury getting like deeper
Yeah.
and deeper, that like once he's already said, "I'm not," maybe that first time he meant it as a way to sort of stay closer to Jesus. But now he said he's not one of the followers. Is he going to change his story? And I don't know. Like now he's stuck in this world of untruth that he has created for himself. And I don't know. I don't know if he's feeling as much distress about it as I am, but
Yeah.
but it looks pretty terrible. I mean, it seems like, I don't know, but it seems like Jesus knew this was going to happen.
Yes. All the way back in 13 when he said, "Before the rooster crows."
Do you think he knew it about, I mean, he said it about Peter in particular, but do you think he imagined that other followers would also have this issue? Like when he says to Annas, "Ask my followers," do you think that he thinks his followers would be faithful and it's just Peter who has this problem?
That's such a good question. So, you know, if you flip back to 13:36 or so, Peter says, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus says, "Where I'm going, you can't follow, but you will follow later." Now, you can read that as, "I'm going to heaven and you can't get to heaven, but someday you'll die and then you'll go to heaven."
Yeah.
Like, fine. But I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. I think Jesus is saying, I'm getting ready to go through this trial and execution and death at the hands of the empire. And that is likely to happen to you too. And in the tradition, it does happen to Peter. We don't get it narrated in the biblical text. But that's the tradition, is that Peter maybe died during the Neronic persecutions in the 60s in Rome. And Peter says, why can't I follow you? I'll give up my life. And Jesus says, no, you won't. Will you give up your life for me? And so I read it as about Peter, but I also read it as about more than Peter. Like, this thing that Jesus is doing is a thing that's really hard to do. And what Jesus does when he's standing there in the hall of power with Annas, and Annas, I don't know exactly if Annas is giving him an out, but Annas is asking for an explanation, asking Jesus to deny something or say something or try to spin something. And he just says, no, like, I am who I am. I did what I did. And like, what do you have? What can you do to me? And Peter, even if Peter is being strategic, Peter is taking exactly the opposite tack there. I'm going to uke me. I'm going to deny from the beginning rather than just saying what is true. And so the contrast is really strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do think that raises questions for other followers of Jesus about both the likelihood that maybe being a follower of Jesus will get you in trouble, and also Jesus maybe saying, I don't know if people can handle that. And also kind of the invitation that you just got to shoot straight and say what is true. Once you start down this slippery slope of I am not, then it's hard to get back.
I think what you just said resonates so much for me. And I also looked at those lines in chapter 13 and really took note of the fact that what Peter wants to do is lay down his life for Jesus. And what that phrase means to me in like just modern English is, I will die so you don't.
Yes.
And that's not like an option in this story.
Right.
And so then I feel like there's some sort of turning of like, I will lay down my life for you, but it means something else. Jesus wants it to mean something else here besides I'll die in your stead.
I love that so much, Amy. And you've helped me understand that passage differently, and I think more clearly than I have understood it before, because it makes sense of that line that Jesus says in 13:36, you can't follow me now, but you will follow later. And so if Peter were to lay down his life and protect Jesus right now, it would actually undo the whole thing.
It would undo the whole thing.
But once Jesus has died and been resurrected, now life has won its victory over death. And so now Peter can lay down his life and take it up again. Now he can follow Jesus because he's allowed Jesus to do the thing that Jesus had to have done. If you read it that way, which I think is a really nice way to read it, then what Jesus might be saying, I love how we're interpreting John 13 right now.
Sorry.
What Jesus might be saying is, in order for you to give up your life, you have to believe in the power of resurrection. And so on Peter's side of the resurrection, where we are right now, he could not have done that and maybe should not have done that. But on our side of the resurrection, now the invitation is, maybe you could do that, and maybe you should do that. Amy, you used the phrase a minute ago, Peter's moral injury. Can you just talk a little more about what you mean when you use that term?
What I mean, and if you mean something else by this term, I hope you'll say so, but is the experience of seeing oneself respond to a situation in a way that we never would have thought we would do. That is, like I always thought I'm the kind of person who would freely claim my connection to, this Lord and Savior. I'm the kind of person who would do such and such. We have these ways of understanding ourselves in the world. And then because of some set of circumstances, we do something that really cuts away at what we would articulate as our understanding of ourselves or our moral beliefs. And then we have to figure out what do we do with that? Like, what does that mean about, does that mean we were never the person we thought we were? Does that, do we abandon our morals because it's too painful to hold on to them? How do we hold the space between how we actually behave in the world and how we think we would behave in the world when it's undeniable, that space?
Thank you for that, Amy. There was a theologian named Rita Nakashima Brock who wrote a book 15 years or so ago about moral injury, recovering from moral injury after a war. And what she was talking about in that book was the kinds of things that one has to do when one is a soldier. That when you re-enter a non-soldierly life, you carry that injury to yourself, the things that you were asked to do, commanded to do, capable of doing, and that you have to find some ways of recovering from that. So that's what I hear when I hear moral injury. But I love the way you're thinking about that as not just applying in that one sort of narrow instance, but just in the living of life and the things that we do or do not do that don't reflect our true values or who we thought we were, that we have to carry with us. Because it invites me to reflect in a different way, I think, about how I might have experienced moral injury and might need to find ways of recovering from that in a way that thinking about moral injury after war doesn't really apply immediately to me, but the way you're talking about it does. It's interesting the way that John ends this story with the rooster crowing. Like, it's been 5 chapters since Jesus said that thing.
Yeah.
And probably we haven't forgotten it, but it's not narrated close together. There's no, in some of the Gospels, there's an eye contact between Jesus and Peter, they look at each other. Or sometimes Peter realizes what he's done, oh my goodness, the cock crowed and now I have to deal with myself. But here, it doesn't affect the narrative at all. Peter denied it, the rooster crowed. You and I remember maybe.
Yeah.
But it's not narrated that Peter does or that Jesus does. Maybe they do, but it's not told to us. Does that bring up anything for you?
I mean, the possibility that Peter is not aware that he's not tracking what's happening.
Yeah.
I feel like it adds another element of magic is a really insufficient word, but this sense in the text that there are things in motion, there are bigger things happening here than anything that any of these characters can control.
Yeah.
And so if we have the image of Peter looking at Jesus as he does it, I mean, I guess he still could. It sort of takes some of the intentionality out of it, or some of the hyper awareness of, I don't know. It puts us almost in the role of the person looking down on the scene, we're the ones who have all this information. And though yes, Peter was exactly told that this is going to happen, since he's not responding to it happening in this moment, at least as it's narrated, it seems like he hasn't noticed that it's happened.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing makes me wonder, what are the other things in the world like that we're surrounded by all these things in the world that we might not be aware that various loops are closing or things are connected. But the narrator of this text is making it very clear to us that they are.
I like that a lot, Amy, that Peter seems oblivious to what has just happened, and maybe in your language of the moral injuries that he is accruing. He just doesn't seem to know that it's happening. But you and I know, and we notice, and it invites us to reflection, I think, on that question for ourselves about, well, if Peter is capable of doing this and not knowing it, then I think that invites us into some conversation with our own selves or our own communities about in what ways might we be denying either Jesus or who we truly are, or accruing moral injury in how we do or do not respond to things. So it invites us to be more reflective than Peter seems to be able to be in this moment. Amy, this text has given us a lot to think about. And so I'm curious, as you're thinking about where this text touches the ground in our world today or your community, what connections are you seeing?
Bobby, I think the reason that the phrase moral injury is in my mind at this time is that I know I am experiencing, and I am hearing a lot of people around me experiencing a sense of watching situations that are fully unacceptable to us unfold in our country and seeing ourselves not respond in the way that we always sort of thought a good person like us, I put that in quotes, would. And there are always reasons. There are reasons. There are always reasons. There are reasons we can give for Peter. Like, there may be strategic reasons that you need to maintain certain relationships and maybe it'll help in the long run. Or there are like immediate sort of needs for your own body or for the people who are in your family and sort of what kinds of needs can you take care of on that front. All of this is true. But I think I am in a time where I am really feeling the distance between who I thought I was and who I seem to be. And trying to both move myself towards actions that feel more aligned with who I am and also sort of hold the kind of grief and shock of that. So that's a little bit of an intense answer.
Yeah.
But I think knowing that I believe Peter when he said in all these other chapters, like, no, I am here with you. I'm here. And then the rules of the game changed a little bit. He wasn't allowed to use the tools he had planned to use. He wasn't like the situation changed. He got confused, whatever it was. And then all of a sudden, look what's happening. I feel like this text is really pressing me to see myself in that situation. Like, what was it that felt so clear to me when I wasn't in this situation that has gotten muddied up somehow? And is there some way to get back to what feels really true? That's what I got for you, Bobby. Just a big, hot mess, but it's real.
Thank you for that, Amy. That is really powerful, and I feel that too. And you and I were together as we were saying this past week, and you were talking a little bit about moral injury and how you were thinking about that. And I've been really chewing on that myself since that conversation. And I appreciate your bringing it out here. I really resonate with that reading of this text. I think that's the right reading. I hardly ever say that. That's the right reading in this moment, as far as I can see. One of the nuances so just taking everything you just said as
please
things.
nuance things.
One of the nuances that, not about what you said, but one of the nuances you drew out for me about this text is that idea that Peter is doing what he thinks needs to be done in order to stay close to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so the denials are not denials that are flat rejections of who he has claimed to have been, but incremental decisions that he thinks are necessary in the moment and do not feel like betrayals to him. And so he says, uke me, I am not, as a way of staying close and following as he understands it. And when you think about it that way, then what you're saying about moral injury and not being who we thought we were, and Peter not being who he thought he was, and this idea that Peter remains oblivious at the end of this text, and he cannot see in this moment, I think the betrayals of his own following of Jesus, of his own commitments that he has made. He can't see them, even though they're right there, and the cock crows and calls our attention to it, and we can see them. And so it invites me to think about the ways in which I am also oblivious to the betrayals of who I thought I was and what following Jesus means, that are things that are very real in my life, but that I may not be paying attention to. The other thing that happens in this text that I think has some energy for me is this sense in which Jesus is just saying what it is. He's like, my life is totally public. Like, I am here with you, the same I was yesterday out on the street. I'm the same now as I was a year ago when I was teaching, when I was turning water into wine. Like, my life is open and true. And I don't have anything to hide from you. And just to sort of think about what that would be to live that way, where you're just who you thought you were and who you are that deeply connected that you don't have to make up a backstory or deny anything or be oblivious.
Yes.
Now, Jesus is Jesus, and I am not Jesus. So maybe the expectations are somewhat different for me, but the model of holding that out and saying, to live in such a way that everybody just knows who you are and you could ask anybody, seems like a good thing to strive for.
Bobby, that's so beautiful. And I think, when you first asked what I would raise up from these chapters in between that we didn't read, I said something about Jesus mentioning this spirit of truth in chapter 14. And I think you just captured really well why that seemed important to me.
Yeah. Well, Amy, thank you for this. I'm not sure I had recognized fully how urgently this text speaks to this present moment until we started talking about it. Yeah. But I see it now. The rooster has crowed, and I now am aware. Yeah. We have the pleasure, challenge of lingering in this final day of Jesus's life for several more weeks. Next week, we'll pick up in the very next verse in John 18:28-40 and see Jesus's interaction with Pilate. So I will look forward to talking with you about that text next time.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks, Amy. Bye. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Baggy, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us next time when we'll continue on with Jesus' trial before Pilate in John 18:28-40. Until then, keep on digging.